Hello and welcome to today's Polaris Delegation of Procurement Authority training that we're providing for Polaris industry partners to give a little bit of insight into our Polaris Delegation of Procurement Authority training. My name is Herman Lyons and I work in the Program Support Division, and co-presenting with me today is Lori Jennings. Lori and I will do our best to highlight the features and benefits of Polaris and the information that we share with our customer agencies so that you have a better idea as Polaris industry partners on the information that's pertinent to your customers. With that said, let's go ahead and dive in. Our agenda really lays the groundwork of what we'll be covering during our presentations and what we do typically cover. We'll talk about an overview of Polaris to make sure everybody has a firm understanding. We'll go into the features and benefits, the ordering procedures. We'll talk about responsibilities of our office. We'll touch on subcontracting, and then we'll wrap it up. Most importantly, with how customers request a delegation of procurement authority. But first things first, let's do a GWAC overview. What is a GWAC? A GWAC stands for a government-wide acquisition contract, and it's a pre-competed multiple award IDIQ contract that agencies can use to buy total IT solutions. We like to let our customer agencies know that GSA's GWACs are specifically for IT services and IT services-based solutions. GWACs are operated by an executive agent designated by the Office of Management and Budget, and it's not subject to the Economy Act. So why would someone use one of GSA's GWACs? Well, here on this slide, we've got 5 things listed, and we'll do our best to highlight what's most important about each one of them. But all of our GWACs are designated as best in class. And what best in class is, it's really OMB's designation to say that these contract vehicles are determined to be amongst the best for the federal government. Now, we would like to let you guys know that Polaris has not received its big designation, but it did receive its pre-designation prior to the award. We still continue to work with OMB, and we'll be sure and let everyone know when we do receive that designation. Speed and cost. Customers issue task order awards against these existing contract vehicles, which really reduces the procurement lead time. Flexibility. Agencies can issue GWAC task orders using their own staff. You'll hear us call that direct order, direct bill, or use the services of an assisted acquisition service, such as GSA's assisted acquisition service. So when you're speaking with customers and they're not quite sure if they have the expertise in-house, please be sure to remember that GSA has support service that we can provide to help them get their task order issued. Our GWACs allow for a wide range of contract types. They allow for fixed price, cost reimbursement, time and material, labor hour, or even a hybrid of those. And lastly on this slide, GWACs charge a low fee. The contract access fee is 3/4%, and that's applied to the total price for contractor performance as billed to the government. Okay. Now, some of GSA's GWAC's benefits. GWACs allow for complete IT services-based solutions. When you think about GWACs, don't think about contractor teaming arrangements, don't think about ODCs. All of those things can be wrapped into a GWAC task order award to provide a total IT service-based solutions. GWACs allow for the purchase of ancillary non-IT components and services when they're integral and necessary to accomplish a solution. So an example that I've been giving for years is, let's say we need to do a network center data, we need to do an overhaul. And part of doing that overhaul, we need to knock down a wall, we need to pull some cable, and there may be some other minor construction, right? We're knocking down a wall in the minor construction as well as pulling cable on their own are not considered an IT service. However, if those things are integral and necessary to accomplishing the IT service, then they can be included on our GWACs. Our GWACs feature a diverse pool of quality of vendors with various socioeconomic categories. And lastly, our GWACs include predefined labor categories. So unlike some other contract vehicles that allow the contractor to define those, we at GSA and in the GWAC program, we identify and we define those labor categories, which is really nice because it allows customers to do an apples to apples type comparison across labor categories. A few more benefits of using GSA's GWAC is that we have streamlined acquisition processes based on FAR 16.5. Just imagine it's much easier for a customer to issue a task order award than it is for them to do their own requirement, where they come up with the requirement, they doing it from cradle to grave like a FAR Part 15. It's really easy for a customer to implement 16.5 acquisition strategies to help along their way. We've got some protection, or I should say customers have protection up to $10 million from protests, except if it exceeding the scope, the period of performance, and the maximum dollar value of the contract. So those apply to the contract and not the task order. And lastly, we provide quality customer service. We've got a team of professionals here in our office who really make it a target goal to respond to emails within, by the same business days, or at the very least, at least 24 hours after request. Okay. So we'll go into the ordering now and how to access a GWAC. And I talked a little bit about this earlier. And what I really want you to think about here is when you have a customer and they ask, how do I issue a task order award? There's some clear language in FAR 16.5 on how to issue a task order award. But one thing that they may be asking you is, how do I access this acquisition vehicle? And as I told you a few minutes ago, there's a couple different ways. You have a direct acquisition, which is sometimes called a direct order, direct bill, and you have an assisted acquisition. The difference between these two is that a direct acquisition is when a requesting agency, so that's the agency who has the need, the requirement, when they have an ordering contracting officer conduct the acquisition and administer it themselves. They've got it under control and they know what they're doing. Fine, no problem. But we often, particularly in the fourth quarter, run into situations where customers have a requirement, right? But they just don't have the resources or the expertise within house to meet their deadline. And that's when we like to introduce assisted acquisition. That's when a procuring agency, ordering contracting officer, conducts the acquisition and they administer it on behalf of the requesting agency. Okay. Now, typically we like to go ahead and introduce GSA's assisted acquisition service, or known as AAS. And it's a team of project managers, acquisition professionals, and contracting officers. And that's what they do. They support the needs of requesting agencies. So just keep this in mind. If you have a customer who says, hey, I really thinking about using the Polaris contract vehicle, but I'm just strapped, I lost a lot of resources, we can always introduce them to GSA's assisted acquisition service. We do like to remind customers all the time that assisted acquisition does charge a fee. And we think that the fee that they charge is really a good bang for the buck for the service that they provide. So just keep that in mind. And if you have any questions specifically, please introduce your customer to us and we can introduce them to GSA's assisted acquisition team. Okay. So who can access a GWAC? Those of you who are on the call, or we like to tell those folks in our trainings, those of you who are on the call taking this training, and after we're done, you obtain a delegation of procurement authority. You may hear us refer to folks as OCOs, and what that simply is ordering contracting officer. And that's how we recognize contracting officers who have taken the DPA training and they've obtained their delegation of procurement authority. So, when a customer asks you, how do I become a DPA holder? Tell them, become familiar with the contract. The Polaris team provides ongoing and routine DPA trainings, and they only last for about 45 minutes to an hour. And I've been through one of them, so I know what it's like. But the most important thing is that customers become familiar with the contract vehicle through training like this, and they actually request a delegation of procurement authority. And we'll show you a little bit later on what that process looks like. Okay. So now that we've talked about GSA's GWAC program, we thought we'd just take the time to introduce the entire program, right? You may hear us refer to names during this presentation. We've mentioned Polaris, but we also have the 8A STARS 3, which is an 8A set aside, our SDV OSB set aside VETS 2, and our 2 GWACs that are full and open, the Alliant 2 and the Alliant 3 contract vehicles, okay? So now specifically, we'll talk about the Polaris contract vehicle, and there's gonna be some overlap in terms of what I talk about in the next few slides and what I've already talked about. But the scope of Polaris is very similar to GSA, the scope of GSA's other contract vehicles, IT services and IT services-based solutions. We've included some technologies on here, such as AI, data management, or immersive technology. What I'd like you to keep in mind is that there's no need for technical refreshes with the Polaris GWAC. As technology evolves, so does the contract vehicle. You'll see that we don't have any sins in our contract vehicle or any specific technology swim lanes. It's if something is IT services or an IT services-based solutions, it can be accomplished with the Polaris GWAC, okay? Now, as I mentioned earlier, you as the contractor can provide some ancillary support with products and non-IT services when they're integral and necessary. I had given you an example with the minor construction and the pulling cable earlier, but here are some other examples, such as clerical, data entry, server racks, or software licenses. So just keep in mind, GWACs and GSA's GWACs are for total IT services-based solutions. And sometimes a solution requires things that on their own are not IT services. So just keep that in mind. And we'll talk a little bit later on about a service that we provide, which we can help your customer know if it fits the scope of the contract vehicle. Now, there are a couple of restrictions on the vehicle, leasing of real estate and real property. The government doesn't want to be a lessee of that. And the sole purpose of any requirement may not be for a commodity. Again, as I've mentioned probably 4 or 5 times already, IT services and IT services based solutions. Okay. Polaris has 4 pools. We've got a small business pool, women owned small business pool, service disabled pool, and hub zone pool. And with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Lori Jennings, who will talk a little bit about the features and benefits of Polaris. Lori?
Thanks, Herman. I'm going to go through some of the features and benefits of the contract and also get into some specific contract details that will be of interest to you as an industry partner. As you may know, our Polaris contract is a 5-year base with a 5-year option, and we have actually listed those dates here for each of our 4 pools, including small business, women-owned small business, hub zone, and SDVOSB. To note, the small business pool ordering period and option periods have not yet been determined. The awardee counts are listed on the slide as well. 102 awardees on the small business pool, 52 awardees on women-owned small business pool with 80 planned, 30 awardees on hub zone with 60 planned, and SDVOSB, 27 awardees with a total of 70 planned. There are 192 labor categories on the Polaris GWAC. You can actually obtain a listing of each of those labor categories within the contract that's available on our Polaris website. Just to note, there is no master contract ceilings. The orders can be as large or as small as an agency needs. Primary NAICS is 541512, but it can include other NAICS that are applicable to the IT service. Next slide. Additional features and benefits of the Polaris GWAC are that it provides worldwide support. So you can assist agencies worldwide in meeting their requirements. We also have a technical refresh clause that allows the contract to adapt to customer needs in the future. As you may know, we have the ability to provide industry credentials and certifications to our customers, and we want to make sure that we are meeting their needs. You may see this in an RFI where they will reach out to determine if we have industry partners who hold specific industry credentials and certifications. We definitely recommend that you respond to those, as that will allow them to know that our contractors on the Polaris GWAC are able to meet those needs. And just to note, at the master contract level, we do a periodic review and determination to determine if there is a need to on-ramp new contractors to our Polaris pools. Allowable contract types on the Polaris GWAC include fixed price, cost reimbursement, incentive, time and materials, and labor hour contracts. These are the types that a federal agency contracting officer may use when soliciting a contract requirement. Next, we'll talk about ordering procedures. And this is actually the competitive ordering process on the Polaris GWAC. So this is what a customer will be going through when they're placing a task order on Polaris, which hopefully you all will receive an award in the future. First, receive training to use the GWAC and obtain the Delegation of Procurement Authority. So this is essentially focused on the contracting officer taking the training and receiving a Delegation of Procurement Authority. This is, as Herman mentioned, the presentation that we give them in order to obtain their Delegation of Procurement Authority. Once they've completed this training, then of course they can request that delegation letter from our team. We generally get that back to them within 5 business days, and then they are a delegated contracting officer and able to use the contract. At that point, an agency is developing their acquisition strategies and defining their requirements, preparing a solicitation, etc., and then issuing that within the selected pool to all companies in that pool. Generally, you will see this coming across as an RFP or RFQ, and it may come across via the e-buy system for which you have registered. From that point, the contract holders compete. They provide their proposals in response to that RFP or RFQ. The agency receives those proposals and evaluates them just as they indicated that they would within their solicitation. From that point, after evaluation is complete, they issue the task order award to the selected vendor. And we do ask them to send a copy of that order, statement of work, PWS, or SOO to the GWAC Center. From there, the contractor performs and the agency conducts their periodic performance surveillance and, of course, ultimately closes out the order with final past performance evaluation. We always tell our customers that at any point in the process, if they need help from our team, we are here and happy to assist. And if they need any additional training, we're happy to provide that as well. This is essentially the ordering process that they go through for a competitive order in which they would be soliciting on the Polaris GWAC. You would then receive that solicitation and respond. So ordering procedures. I'm not going to touch on all of these, but a couple of key items to note are that ordering procedures must comply with fair opportunity requirements of FAR 16.5. As I mentioned, this essentially means that fair opportunity is provided to everyone within the selected pool of Polaris. So it may be competed on the women-owned small business pool, SDVOSB, Hub Zone, or small business. It should not be competed among the various pools. It is possible that you might see an RFI come out on the various pools, but an RFP or solicitation would not be competed amongst the pools. Another item to note is that only a delegated contracting officer who has a written GSA-issued Polaris GWAC program DPA may issue Polaris orders. It may be advantageous to you to check with that contracting officer who is issuing a task order to ensure that they do have a Polaris DPA. If they do not, we can simply provide them with training and get them that delegation letter very quickly. As I mentioned, fair opportunity, we also talked about the competitive ordering process. There's also an exception for that. And there are exceptions that contracting officers can utilize when placing an order. These are very rare. However, a couple of these include urgency, meaning that providing fair opportunity would cause an unacceptable delay. That order has got to be issued immediately. Unique capability, if they know that only one awardee can meet those requirements, might be another reason for an exception to fair opportunity. And then the last one I'm going to note is set aside of task orders. Can be utilized in the small business pool with approval from the Polaris contracting officer, but cannot be used in socioeconomic pools. So you should not see a specific set aside within the Hub Zone, SDVOSB, or women-owned small business pool. Just a couple of notes on the exception to fair opportunity. Written justification and approval is required at the contracting officer level. So that means that they have had to go through a lengthy process in order to do an exception to fair opportunity. And also they have posting requirements for orders that are above the simplified acquisition threshold. But that information is then public unless there is a reason why it should not be public. So again, fair opportunity is required on our GWACs under FAR 16.5. There are exceptions, however, in which a contracting officer must document that and then post information, if available and applicable, following the order. So let's talk about labor categories. For those of you who are familiar We do have 48 predefined labor categories with 4 skill levels in each. And you, as an awardee, have access to that information. We've also published the labor category information within our contracts. And we also have the pricing and maximum labor hour rates available at gsa.gov/Polaris. So we wanted to provide that information for our customers so that they can see the pricing available on Polaris, and also so that it is available to you at your fingertips at the gsa.gov/Polaris website. I do want to mention that additional labor categories may be added, and that is actually at the discretion of the task order ordering contracting officer. Oftentimes that is a discussion between that ordering contracting officer and industry to say, we don't currently have a labor category that covers this, but we would suggest an additional labor category be added. So that might be a conversation between you and the contracting officer if there is a need to add additional labor categories that are not already covered in those 48 predefined labor categories. Next, we'll talk about some of the responsibilities between the GWAC office and ordering contracting officers. So from the perspective of the GWAC office, we are here to provide risk mitigation and contractor oversight. We conduct pre-award scope review. So if a customer would like for us to, we can review their statement of work, statement of objectives, or PWS, and let them know if it is a good fit for the Polaris GWAC. Essentially, we send them back a letter that says, yes, we think this is a good fit, or we have some questions, let's discuss this further. A lot of agencies take advantage of this. It is actually really good for risk mitigation in that GSA has reviewed the scope beforehand and believes it is a good fit. So we encourage customers to take advantage of that, but it is optional as a scope review. We're here to provide client support, whether customers have questions about the master contract, terms and conditions, how to place a task order, how to navigate FAR 16.5, and more. So we definitely want to encourage you to provide us as a resource to customers when you're speaking with them if they want to have a government-to-government conversation. We are also responsible for reporting annually to the Office of Management and gives us our authority to operate these GWACs. Some additional responsibilities of the GWAC team include monitoring competition under fair opportunity, which we talked a little bit about previously, but we do want to make sure that fair opportunity is provided when applicable. We also monitor compliance with subcontracting limitations. We want to ensure that these are not pass-through contracts and that our industry partners are doing that predominant amount of work. We also conduct program meetings and reviews with you, our industry partners, to ensure that you're up to date on anything FAR contract related, IT, etc. So we want to make sure that we provide education and an opportunity for you to have questions answered, etc. We also, as you know, provide regular training sessions on topics of interest as well. If there's ever anything that pops up that you think would be beneficial for us to train on, please reach out to your team and let them know. We'd be happy to coordinate that. We also perform a closeout of the master contract. So when the performance and ordering period, everything is done on this Polaris GWAC, we will perform a master contract closeout. And our team is actually responsible for developing business cases for a new GWAC. So whatever the future holds for the GSA GWAC program may involve a next generation GWAC. So that is also our responsibility as well. Some of the responsibilities of the ordering contracting officer or the agency ordering official include complying with terms and conditions of the GWAC and FAR, making sure that the work is within the scope of the contract. Again, these are IT services GWACs, meaning that the predominance of the project needs to be IT services, but can include some of those items that are ancillary and necessary that are non-IT services. We want to make sure that that contracting officer is providing a fair opportunity to be considered. as applicable, specifically on a competitive task order award. We want to have them request audit assistance when applicable, and we are here to help them as well. We want to make sure that a contracting officer is verifying funding and complying with appropriation law, financial policy, and their own internal policy. And if a contracting officer's representative or COR is assigned, making sure that they know the extent of their authority and responsibilities. So these are the responsibilities of the ordering contracting officer, and we just really want to be here to support them and make sure that they're using the Polaris GWAC correctly. Some additional responsibilities include monitoring and evaluating contractor performance. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with CPARs or other agency past performance systems where they enter and track performance of industry partners. They are also responsible for entering order data into FPDS-NG, which is a tracking system / repository of task orders that have been issued by the federal government. Ordering contracting officers are also responsible to responding to FOIA requests, protests, disputes, and claims at the task order level. And of course, if they need any assistance, to reach out to GSA to support them. Ordering contracting officers are also responsible for ensuring prompt payment of contractor invoices. So we want to make sure that you are provided with payment as applicable within that invoice and under the task order guidance. And then, of course, performing that task order closeout in accordance with FAR Point 4. And we also ask them to provide a copy of that to us. That way we know that that task order is complete and we can close it out at the master GWAC level. Next, we'll talk about subcontracting considerations. So we've kind of talked about this from 3 angles. The first is from the contract holder or you as industry. We want to make sure that you are complying with the limitations on subcontracting clause, which you will find in FAR Part 52. And we also require subcontracting reports to be submitted to our team for the Polaris GWAC. If you are not familiar with what those limitations are, I suggest that you reach out to your contracting officer for Polaris so that you can be provided with additional guidance. From an agency perspective, we are asking the OCO to, of course, track as necessary for subcontracting reports. They may ask you for additional information regarding the task order and subcontract monitoring. At the GSA level, we are collecting and monitoring your subcontracting reports and handling any agency questions on subcontracting. So I think we all have the same goal, which is to ensure that our subcontracting is monitoring and these are not pass-through contracts. If you do have any questions about subcontracting monitoring at any time, please reach out to your Polaris contracting officer. I will now hand this over to Herman.
Thanks, Lori. I'll take it from here. We'll talk a little bit about the actual delegation of procurement authority. During these next few slides, we really show our industry partners, we show our ordering contracting officers how to request a DPA. And we drive everybody to gsa.gov/GWACs. From gsa.gov/GWACs, you'll see an opportunity where you can complete the DPA certification form, and that's located under the request a DPA section. So when your customer asks you, how do I request a DPA? Just remember gsa.gov/GWACs, and from there, they can go to request a DPA. Once the DPA is submitted, ordering contracting officers will receive a confirmation. It will include the memorandum of agreement, and they'll typically get that within 2 business days. And here on this screenshot shows you what it will actually look like. If you look at step number 3 toward the bottom, it'll provide a link to the DPA certification form, and from there, we'll receive the request. They will enter information such as their first name, last name, their email, etc., and they'll verify that they became familiar with the contract vehicle. One thing we'd like to always remind our DPA holders is that the DPA lasts for the life of the GWAC. So if they change agencies, if they change emails, if they change phone numbers, they don't lose their DPA. They simply just need to let us know that there's been some changes in contact information. We'll update our database and they'll continue to have their delegation of procurement authority through the life of the Polaris contract vehicle. We do also introduce them to some of the e-tools that we have to make life a little bit easier on them. And our most used tool is our website, which is gsa.gov/Polaris. From the Polaris website, they can see the terms and conditions of the contract. They can download the master conforming contract. They can see the labor categories within the contract, all the clauses that are applicable. They can also take a look at our ordering guide. We've got an ordering guide, which is about 55 or 60 pages, but really, really a helpful resource. It's got some templates in there, things they should do, things they should stay away from. So just go ahead and keep gsa.gov/Polaris in mind as you try to help your customers navigate through our e-tools that we have. The next e-tool that I introduce is GSA's eBuy. And eBuy is an online request for quotes, proposals tool, RFIs, MRAS, etc. All of you as industry partners are populated or preloaded into GSA's eBuy. And we really, really drive that home during the DPA training. As Lori mentioned, FAR 16.5 and fair opportunity is extremely important. And we'd like to let our customers know that all industry partners have been uploaded and pre-populated into GSA's eBuy within the specific Polaris pool. And that way they know that they'll have achieved fair opportunity if they use this tool. But after logging into eBuy, they'll have the ability to navigate. They'll go through categories. They'll pick technology. They'll identify a GWAC, and from there, they'll see a list of GWACs, and they would go ahead and select the Polaris pool. Okay. Lori talked a little bit about this earlier, in that we'll take a customer through the process of letting them know if their requirement appears to be within scope of Polaris. As Lori said, it's optional. I like to tell people it's fast, it's free, and there's no commitment. So if your customer's just not quite sure if their requirement is within the scope of the Polaris contract vehicle, tell them, hey, once you have peace of mind and sleepy is at night by submitting that to the GSA.gov team. And they can go to GSA.gov Polaris and we'll have instructions on what they submit, where they submit it, etc. Okay. One of the last tools that we'll show you also is the GWAC dashboard. Sometimes our ordering contracting officers, they're just not quite as familiar with GWACs as we think they should be. Or, we just have this misperception about what we think they know. And the reality is that a lot of ordering contracting officers that are coming over to get their DPA, they're just not as familiar with GWACs as we think they should be. We like to go ahead and show them our GWAC sales dashboard. And the GWAC sales dashboard has GWAC task order data or transactional data by contract family, by federal agency, and by industry partner. And a lot of times customers will ask, well, can you tell me about the usage within my agency, or can you tell me others within my agency who have used GWACs? And a lot of times here we'll go ahead and tell them, yes, 50 task order awards have been issued by the Department of Homeland Security over the past 4 years in our GWAC program. We can share we can share task order numbers with them, and then they can go digging within their agencies and find out the experiences of their colleagues. So just keep the GWAC sales dashboard in mind, especially when providing a level of comfort to customers and that they're not going to be, among the first to be using GSA's GWAC contract vehicles. Okay. With that being said, we'll go ahead and wrap up our presentation. We want to always remind you that we don't want you to attend this training in vain. Those of you who are federally warranted contracting officers, we want to remind you to complete your DPA certification from the GWAC overview page. We realize that many people in this training are not federally warranted contracting officers, but we're still glad you're here, right? One day you may get a warrant. And even if you don't get a warrant, right, we realize that it takes all members of an acquisition team to efficiently and effectively execute a task order warrant. Again, if you'd like us to take a look at your statement of work, go ahead and submit that. Again, it's fast, it's free, and it's no commitment. And I should also remind you that it's private as well. There's only the folks with a need-to-know basis have access to your requirements. So just know that it's secured within GSA's environment. GSA.gov/Polaris has the scope, terms, and other Polaris information, as well as our ordering guide. A couple reminders: ensure that the contract access fee or the CAF is completed as a separate CLIN, and we want you to remind everybody to report all task order awards and modifications in accordance with the MOA.